Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, at the end of every episode, I always encourage you all to email me and invite you to come on this podcast and sit down with me and have a good old-fashioned chat. But when I found out today's guest had been listening to the show for 8 months, it made today's episode feel even more special, because I do consider each and every one of you listening all over the world in 165 different countries. I consider you all my spirit animals. We're all on this journey together. And today I want to talk about legacy technology, and more specifically, the challenges that businesses continue to face with legacy technology, and use the database industry as a case in point to show how business legacy arrangements are actually hindering their chances for being competitive in this post-COVID digital first world. So on the topic of that legacy dilemma, Chris Harris from Couchbase is going to argue that business reliance on legacy database technology, and the likes of Oracle, for example, is actually holding them back from achieving their real digital goals. So I want to learn more about all manner of tech, from cloud and IoT through to AI and 5G, and how they're all calling for a more higher level of data agility than legacy databases are ever going to be able to provide. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to the UK, where you can join me and Chris Harris in conversation. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Chris. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Well, it's great to be on the show, Neil. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm Chris Harris. I work at Couchbase, where we focus on really building out the next generation of enterprise databases. I run the field engineering team here at Couchbase, and you're possibly thinking, what does field engineering mean? Field engineering means that here at Couchbase, I run the technical pre-sales organization around the world. We're out there helping people understand whether or not Couchbase is the right solution for them. I also run the professional services organization, team that are out there doing delivery every day with their customers, and as well as Couchbase Academy. So if you ever wanted to get certified or trained on Couchbase, you can go to our website, and we've got Couchbase Academy, as well as customer success, making sure that people get proper value out of their database solutions. That's what I do.
Wow, sounds like you spin a lot of plates there. And I'd love to take you back before Couchbase and find out a little bit more about your origin story. I mean, can you remember where your passion for tech came from and what it was that put you on this path you're on today?
I suppose I got a pretty traditional path. Maybe it may not be.
Yeah.
When I was young, I was a gamer. That's where I came from, and back in the days, you could not only play games, but you started to write your own little games, and then you started to build PCs. And as I went through school, kind of realized that, hold on, I could actually get paid for this. And I went and did computer science. I love innovation. I love driving new things. I love technology. So I continued down that path, and I still actually play games today, as some people may know. And then, obviously, I did computer science. Was lucky enough to take a series of engineering jobs that are in the innovation space. We started off in a company that did chip and pin. We launched that out into the UK market. Went on from there and did a lot of e-commerce development. And there was this overall trend that I was seeing that really drove excitement for me, which was the open source space. A lot of the technology I was working with as an engineer at the time was open source. And then I was lucky enough to join Red Hat when they just moved into the middleware space. And so I was joined that as a consultant. I did a lot of their middleware, JBoss innovation, really driving out a new next generation of middleware. Went from there and joined SpringSource. That was drove a lot of innovation in the Java development market and got acquired by VMware. But there was this overall trend, again, that we were seeing when we were building applications, around the database. The database was the key kind of solid thing that was always the same thing, no matter what we were doing. And I then had an opportunity to join MongoDB. At the very early stages, I was the third person in Europe to join that company at the start. And that was about trying to relook at the market when the whole NoSQL space came along and said, hey, not all databases have to be relational. So the whole NoSQL market started to begin, and you had different types of databases entering the market. So that was interesting times. And again, a lot of innovation happening. And then I went on from there to really open up the market as the first person for Hortonworks and Cloudera, and redefine analytics for the last 7 years before I joined Couchbase. And we kind of looked at the overall analytics market. What is a data lake? We defined that into the market. And then what was Hadoop? And that was, let's say, great 7 years of building out the international market there. And then Couchbase. And we've I spent the last 2 years here with the team redefining what the enterprise database market is.
And listening to the very beginning of your story there, I was getting flashbacks of typing in code or copying code from a book into my BBCB.
There you go. I remember that. I remember the days where they rolled in the computer from, in classrooms. You remember that?
Yeah, but it took me a day copying all this code, pages and pages of it. Then it took me equally as long to correct all the syntax errors that I made. So kudos to you for keep going. I was ready to give up after 3 weeks of that.
It's fun times.
Yeah, and you still play games now. So are you a PC Master Race guy or a console guy? What are you playing now?
Oh, well, I started off with my son on the back to the consoles, and then a couple of years ago, we built our own PC and now into PC gaming. So he's got a full rig, and we sit together the weekends and play games. So.
And what about virtual reality? Have you gone down that road yet?
Yeah, we've gone down that road. I have the headset, and that's all fun.
Oh, I love it. And that path, of course, led you to Couchbase, which is the modern database for enterprise applications. Performance at scale that runs anywhere without compromise. But can you expand on the kind of problems that you solve for businesses, just in case we have any listeners outside of tech that are hearing about you for the first time?
Yeah, I kind of briefly hinted at it in my journey there. If you look at what the database market has been through, many years ago, everything used to be on what was called a relational database. It was to be the one database kind of rows and columns. And what happened was this NoSQL market appeared. And the NoSQL market said, not everything has to be in rows and columns. And also the way in which the traditional databases were built, they were built for client server. They weren't designed for this modern environment of cloud, digital transformation, high performance, getting all the data to customers in real time. That wasn't what they were designed for. So the NoSQL market appeared and said, let's pick the right database for the right application. So then the market spawned into, we have a document database, and we have a caching database, and we have a graph database, and we have a search database, and we have a fragmentation of databases now everywhere that people have in their enterprises. Couchbase took a step back and said, why? Why do we need to do this? We don't need all these different types of databases. We need a database that has all these capabilities. So you'll hear a lot of companies struggle with the idea that they have 50, 40 different types of databases that they have. And it's very difficult for them to then manage the skill set, manage the scale that they need from all these different types of databases. So Couchbase said, no, bring it back into an enterprise database that can perform search, can perform caching, can have a document database, can do analytics all in one environment rather than fragmentation across the industry.
And in my IT days, I still get flashbacks of legacy applications that hold back everything from operating system upgrades to service pack upgrades. And I know that in many large organizations and industries such as aviation, for example, they have tech that dates back to the 60s and 70s, and they keep building on top of that legacy tech. But I'm curious, can you share your insights on the kind of challenges that businesses continue to face with legacy technology, and also how businesses' legacy arrangements actually hinder their chances of being competitive in this post-COVID digital-first world that we find ourselves in now?
That's interesting, because you probably heard the phrase that data has gravity, right? Mm. That's been kicked around for quite a few years now. And that's very, very true if you think of it, even at the database systems, right? Everything comes back down to these database systems. So you might be trying to drive a digital transformational program and trying to do sophisticated or new things in the application, but get very much restricted due to the pull, if you want, or the capabilities of the database that you have underneath you. And what the interesting thing about that, and this kind of goes back to these traditional databases weren't designed to have the large volumes of users and the large volumes of personalization and demands that people have. And what I mean by that is that let's take something fairly simplistic. Much of the data that people were capturing was transactional data, which was what did you purchase when you went to a store. However, it never recorded or allowed you to do analytics of why you purchased. How did you get there? How were you? What pages did you click through? How did you interact with the whole process in order for you to make that decision on to perform that transaction? Or how did you use the product? And many things are online today. Are people getting value? Are they might have purchased it, but they may have only logged in once, so they may not go to a certain area. So you can use data to not only understand the transaction itself, but you can also understand the whole, why did somebody buy and what their future trends are going to be. That's a large volume of data that these systems were never designed for. So if you look at that, what was the problem? Was it the issue of the language? Do I need to retrain all my engineers, which is where the NoSQL space came from when you have all these different types of databases? Now I have to go and educate somebody on how do I code in a document database? How do I do different coding if I want to do a search database? How do I do different coding if I want to do a caching system? Well, hold on here, right? That's a huge skill set that I now have to retrain my entire organization for per application. It doesn't work for me. I want to be able to leverage the skills I already have. So it's not only an architectural challenge that people are facing, but it's a skill challenge that they have in their organization. And what we're trying to say is, why can't you re-leverage the skills that you already have in things like SQL? SQL was never the problem. It was the underlying architecture that was the problem. So it's like, if you want to learn how to drive an electric car, you shouldn't have to relearn how to drive. You should be able to leverage your existing skills.
So if we do have a business leader listening anywhere in the world who's nodding their head in agreement with everything that you've just said, how can they cast off those shackles and finally stop repeating that awful mantra that we all hear in businesses, which is, well, it is what it is, or we are where we are? How can we get away from that and start embracing modern alternatives?
Oh, that was interesting. We just did a Couchbase Connect event. A lot of customers speak, and you can go on our website and find it. But they all drove the same message, which was you've got to innovate competitively in the market. If you don't innovate from our customers' perspective, they will just get taken out in the market. It's as simple as that. So how do they do it? It's not a question of if they should do it. It's how. And to me, that's finding the ability to have a chance to leverage the skills that you already have. We all know that there's a challenge out there in terms of number of developers that are in the market. So being able to leverage the SQL skills that are out there, it's the most popular kind of database language that's out there. So hence why we allow people to leverage their SQL skills. We also make it easy to be able to deploy it anywhere, right? Because if you think of the challenge that people have, which is, yes, this is new technology, but how do I get started? Then you have the ability to go to the cloud and leverage that. So you can invest as you grow rather than having to do large investments up front.
And I think many businesses fall into the trap of thinking that they're incredibly unique and nobody does things like they do. And it's much easier for other companies than it is for them. So I'm curious, just to bust that myth, are there any trends in the conversations that you're having with your customers that they're calling you and asking for your help with? And are many trying to solve the same problems right now?
I think there's commonality around legacy databases that people are trying to step away from, and that goes back to my comment before around database has gravity, and they're feeling the shackles of that pulling them down, so they're looking to break away from that. There's also how the applications are being written, and if you look at, people talk about edge computing. But there's an interesting question of what do they mean by edge computing? Because we have customers out there today who leverage Couchbase not just on a traditional, if you say, data center, large-scale database environments, but actually being able to run their database all the way down onto I'll give you an example, the mobile phone. And we've all done, as a user, as a customer, if you like, use our mobile phone every day and get frustrated by the fact that I've lost connection, my app stops working, like it's just slow, and I keep bashing the phone until I get a response. And that's because it's lost connection. It can't talk to its database in its backend. Well, we've worked with many of our clients to embed the database in the phone itself. So if it loses connection, it can still operate. And then when it gets its connection back, it automatically syncs back up to the database back in the cloud or back in the data center. So really helping them re-look at how they're using databases, not just way up in the traditional data centers, but on the cloud and down onto the edge.
And do you have any examples of how you're helping customers overcome these challenges, just to bring to life much of what we're talking about?
You mentioned aviation at this, a few moments ago. If you go to Connect, our event, and it's recorded, you can pick up the sessions. I'll give you some examples. So Emirates, as an example, who spoke there, are obviously an airline, and we've all been on flights and you've probably seen it, right? You may not have noticed it, but you've probably seen it. As you get on a flight, you have all these ground crew people running around with loads of paper, and you have the crabbing crew, and you have the pilots, and they're all talking to each other, and they're all trying to figure out what's going, getting the plane ready, and then there's a lot of obviously conversations that are happening during the flight. So if you think of that, wouldn't it be great if there was a technical log that all of these ground crew people, all of the pilots, all of the cabin crew were able to share and electronically record what they're doing rather than have all of this paper running around? Well, that sounds like a great idea, but now we're talking about a plane that's in the air.
Yeah.
Right. That's a challenge. So this is where they've started to leverage Couchbase to say, yes, we can have a shared application, a shared technical log across all of the cabin crew. And as they use this, it's going to a centralized database so that they can all share and record the technical data that they need, but also have the database operate whilst they're in the air, right? Which is in a kind of unique position. And that's just one example in the airline You see other examples out there with Marriott around the distribution of all their hotels. You'll be able to see sessions from people like Amadeus, the loyalty program. That's again another fascinating challenge around. People think loyalty is a straightforward business, but it's not if you think of where you can spend all your different loyalty points and how the different businesses can collect points. So, you might think that you can collect points just from going on flights, but you also then collect points for staying in the hotels and be able to spend it on cars and be able to leverage it in many different ways and share it across the ecosystem of partners that they have. So it's people are building really fascinating applications these days.
And I tell you, there's one thing worse than seeing all those people on the ground running around with bits of paper. I think it was about 18 months ago. I was in the tunnel that they keep you in before you're waiting to get onto an aeroplane. And there was a PC there with a Windows XP screen and Windows XP screensaver. I suddenly had a final destination moment and thought, should I be getting on this plane?
That's when you know too much about the technology.
But could you also share your thoughts on where you see the database industry moving next and what other emerging technologies businesses are increasingly demanding too? What kind of things are you seeing there?
So the database technology is moving into three major areas in which I myself and obviously Couchbase believe we need to make it easier for developers. Right. So how do you develop faster is a massive movement that we see. And that is about ensuring that people can leverage their skill sets that they already have. We started down that path. We need to continue down that path so that people can build these digital transformational applications in a far faster way than they have before. We need to be able to, with classes, deploy anywhere. And this is, as I mentioned, yes, there are some people who will continue to leverage the databases in their private data centers, but you see this movement to the cloud. And that movement to the cloud isn't just about simply having a database running the cloud. That really then moves to database as a service, where the organizations don't have to worry about the operational aspects of the database, but can focus on using the database to get value and allow the service itself to operate itself via Couchbase Cloud or the other database vendors that are out there. And then you take the cloud, and as I say, you go all the way to the edge. Right? We're already starting to work with the cloud providers and what that means, because they have the edge data centers now, and then, as I mentioned, into the mobile phones, and then ultimately into devices. So you see the database moving, and that's, again, about being able to take off these shackles of the data gravity that people are suffering from. But we do all of these things knowing the fact that we have to maintain performance at scale. Because you can't just say, I can make it easier for developers, leverage their current skill set, can deploy anywhere, but if it doesn't perform, I can't get the value that I need out of it. So we have to continue to grow that high performance response time that customers and their end customers kind of demand as the database market grows.
And of course, we are at that time of the year where we've got one eye on the following year, 2022. Can't even believe I'm saying that out loud as a man of a certain age. But what's your big focus going to be next year? I appreciate you probably can't share too much, but is there anything you can?
Well, obviously, as I kind of briefly mentioned, a lot of the focus is going to be on cloud.
Yeah.
Now, we've just launched Couchbase Capella, which is our cloud service. So that's a fully hosted database service, so anybody can literally go on there today and with a few clicks of a button in about 3 minutes have their database up and running and start to develop applications. And we're going to continue to innovate in that space and just make it easier and easier for everybody to leverage the database. And as I mentioned, we'll continue to drive a large volume of innovation down onto the edge. That's a big focus for us.
Now, before we started recording the podcast today, you did tell me you've been listening to the show for 8 months, so you kind of know what's going to be coming now. So I'm not going to be able to catch you out with this one. But a song I always ask my guests is: we started with your origin story. What has been the soundtrack to your career in tech? Is there a song or piece of music that means anything to you that we can add to our Spotify playlist?
So kind of I would go with Journey, Don't Stop Believing. And that's what I would go with. And I kind of play that for quite a lot, actually. And to me, that helps me with, for myself, just keep me going, keep the team kind of moving forward, and, just keep believing as a company that, we're driving innovation that matters. That's what I play that soundtrack quite regularly.
That's a great choice. And I think you've just given me a Journey earworm for the rest of the day. It's going to be playing on repeat inside my head. But for anyone listening that would like to find out more information about Couchbase, maybe check out some of the videos from the recent event that you mentioned there, or contact your team. What's the best starting point to find all those things? Yeah,
absolutely. You can go to our website, obviously, it's couchbase.com. We just done our event a couple of weeks ago. All the sessions were recorded. They're all available. You can go to Couchbase Connect. That all that content will be available for at least for the next few months, and so feel free to register for that. If you obviously want to contact me directly, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Chris Harrison. Just search for Couchbase. There's a few Chris Harrises in the world, so don't reach out to the racing driver. He might not help you with database questions.
Oh, I absolutely love that. I love chatting with you today. And yes, all too often businesses lack the resources to adopt more modern alternatives that are better suited to meeting the requirements of digital transformation. Cannot thank you enough for highlighting that and how you're helping businesses overcome these challenges. But more than anything, just for sharing your origin story, how you got where you are, and also leaving me with a great tune as well. So thanks for joining me today, Chris.
Thank you, Neil. It's been great to be on the show.
So a big thank you to Chris for taking the time to come on here and share all that. But now I'm going to turn the virtual microphone over to you. What are your thoughts? What are your experiences? I'm sure wherever you work, there's going to be examples of legacy technology and old applications that nobody wants to move away from that are running on. And not to mention those that are running on a server in a room, but nobody quite knows what it is or how it works, and they're too afraid to switch it off. So keep your stories coming in. Email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk, and we'll keep that conversation going. But a big thank you for listening as always. I'll see you all tomorrow, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.